You're listening to Energy Insiders, a weekly update on clean energy and climate policy with Renew Economy's editor Giles Parkinson and leading energy analyst David Leach. Energy Insiders is brought to you by Evergen, providing cutting-edge energy management software for battery optimisation, virtual power plants and distributed energy resources. And Pylon, helping solar installers and retailers design high-resolution solar proposals in minutes.
Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Energy Insiders podcast. My name is Giles Parkinson. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Renew Economy and editor of its EV-focused sister site, The Driven. And joining me, as usual, after a lengthy trip, or in the middle of a lengthy trip up and down the New South Wales East Coast in his very new X-Peng, is ITK Principal David Leach. David, I trust you are well and all charged up.
Look, what a long, strange trip it's been, Giles. Coming to us from, I'm coming to you from Forster this afternoon, home of the hippie revolution, where I've just been watching dolphins and bloody rainbows, and goodness knows, one of these days I might even see a wind farm or a solar farm, but not if it's going to be built by AGL or Origin. I'll be dead before those guys build anything. But haven't we got a great guest this week?
I wait for the day, David, when you can talk about rainbows without calling them bloody rainbows. But anyway. We do have a fantastic guest, Alison McLean, the Economic Development Officer from the Shire, right down the southwest of New South Wales, right in the middle of the southwest renewable energy zone, in an area where there are 40 gigawatts of renewable projects, as you will hear very shortly. And it is really interesting. You wanted us to go out to the regions and hear from people sort of looking at these renewable developments and how they go about them. And Alison McLean tells a very interesting story about the approach down there in the southwest, how it is different to the approaches or the lessons they've learned from elsewhere in the country. So I'm not going to spoil any more. Let's just go straight into that interview. Alison McLean, thank you very much for joining the Energy Insiders podcast.
Great to be with you both.
You're the Senior Economic Development Officer in the Hay Council in the southwest region of New South Wales. Did I get that right after mucking up your name earlier on?
Hay Shire Council, I think we'll find.
It is Hay Shire Council, and it's a long-winded local government title: Executive Manager, Economic Development and Tourism.
So what does that job involve, and how has the growth of all the renewable projects in your region affected that, and how have you addressed that? I suppose just sort of give us a bit of a lead into how you got involved.
When I started this role 5 years ago, renewable energy was just an idea, really. It hadn't sort of hit the ground here in Hay, and so economic development at that stage was what everyone would recognise in a traditional rural council. The aim of it was to find a widget factory that would move to a rural area, solve all of our problems by creating a whole heap of jobs and diversify the economy. And anyone who has been in that role will understand that that is an almost impossible task.
Unless it's a data centre. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off topic.
You read my mind. Until renewable energy came into the conversation. And then renewable energy and the Southwest Res really started to change how we viewed the economy and the opportunities that were going to come our way.
And how was it best to approach it? Because you've probably seen the Southwest Zone wasn't the first place to sort of have renewable projects, and there's been an experience in other areas of New South Wales and Victoria, Queensland and South Australia for that matter. What did you decide to do differently from other regions, or what lessons had you learnt from elsewhere?
Probably two things. One was that I have lived in this area. So for those who don't know where Hay is, it's halfway between Sydney and Adelaide. It's on the famous Hay Plains, the flattest place in the southern hemisphere, a treeless plain known for its agriculture, particularly sheep. I knew this community very well. I'm a member of the community, and I know how this community can react when there is a topic that is contentious or involves a significant amount of change. So I'd witnessed that with other issues. At the same time, I was aware of what was happening in the other reses, particularly New England and Arana, and the impact that had had on families that I knew well, families who were friends of mine, and in those small communities. Small communities, although we love to think that we're completely unique, often have a similar set of characteristics. And so I felt that if we didn't do something to support our community through this transition, then we would probably be a headline in the Herald.
And Alison, I think just to continue on that topic, not interrupting Giles, that you had a meeting perhaps by chance with people from RE Alliance that helped to shape how to approach the issue.
Absolutely. So one of the concerns that I had in this community is that when a small, loud majority get a hold of a conversation or a topic, and I have seen this many times, that voice becomes the truth. And there is nothing once that has happened that you can actually do. We, as members of a small community, you tend to shy away from confrontation, and so people will shy away from that conversation even if they want to be part of it. I was really aware of that. I was looking out for other local government areas who had fixed that issue, who had addressed that issue, and I couldn't find anything. And I think it was because the renewable energy coming into rural areas was such a new and dynamic topic that no one was really looking at this early stage that we were going to do. I serendipitously ran into Kate Hook, who was then working for Realliance in the car park at work. We had some mutual friends in common. We started talking about, I was very concerned about my community. I didn't want my community to divide in half. Kate, through her work with Realliance, had seen where processes had worked well and where they had worked very badly. And we looked together with Andy Bray from Realliance to do something that was really quite innovative at that stage. But what we really wanted to do was make sure the community didn't divide, but also that we didn't lose this opportunity.
So what exactly then did you decide to do?
We decided to respect our community, I think, and that was the difference. We understood that our topography suits renewable energy development. We understand that our sparse population suits renewable energy development. We understand that renewable energy is a very contentious topic for people in rural communities, and so we thought, why not show the respect that these people deserve, give them all of the information, and let the community feel informed enough and empowered enough to make a decision about whether this was something our community would support or not support. And in doing that, we were able to really bring the community along in this discussion.
One of the complaints from other regions in the way they've been treated by renewable energy developers, and I guess there's been a whole bunch of sort of land grabbers, as you could probably describe them, sort of people just coming on and just trying to lock up various properties or various parcels of land for potential projects down the track. So what was your approach then to developers and some of those agents who like to sort of pick up land? And I think some of the hassles, particularly in the Central West Zone, is that people have been sort of, had their door knocked by, goodness knows how many people, different parties offering, the best or the worst of something. So what was your message? How did you coordinate with these development proposals?
Right from the start, we ran through this process, and the proposition that we put to the community is we can either have this done to us or it will be done with us in terms of the transition. And our community is a very resilient community. We're a very isolated area that by the very definition has to solve our own problems, and we've been doing it for a really long time. So for my community to be part of a conversation rather than have something happen to it was a very attractive proposition. And I think that's probably the key as to why the community got behind this process. In saying that, again, with the sparse population, it was like a gold rush, I'll be honest. There were developers popping up left, right, and centre. But because we'd done this process, because we'd informed the community, because we had a document, as boring as that sounds, a document that listed all of the fears that our community had identified, the impacts that we wanted to address, the opportunities that we saw, and how we wanted everyone to behave in this conversation, it meant the developers came in with a real understanding of our community. So we didn't get cookie cutter approaches to consultation. We were able to show the developers that
You set the agenda.
we set the agenda, we set the rules of engagement, That was something the developers had not seen before, and I think because they weren't spending a lot of time and energy trying to, appease certain parts of the community, they were able to be really innovative in their approaches to how they did the community consultation and the conversations that they had with neighbours and with landholders. And I'd have to say on the whole, the developers were very respectful of the landholders and neighbours and the community.
And I'll come on to the story a little bit more and its sequencing, but I have to ask, I think I was looking you up on LinkedIn and you were at school in Rose Bay, I think, or something like that. Is that because you came from the country to go to school or because you grew up in the eastern suburbs and then moved to the country? I'm just kind of interested in the career path.
I must take that off my LinkedIn. I grew up in Orange, and then my family moved to Sydney, so we could go to high school in Sydney, and then in Astoria's oldest time, I met a boy from the country, and I married a farmer.
So I'm from Armidale in New England, and as you say, it's fairly familiar. I think my own mother was much the same as it happens. She grew up in Sydney. My father was from Narrabri originally, and wanted to move to. We moved to Armidale, and Mum went on to be mayor eventually. So I mean, it is, as you say, an old story, but an interesting one. So I guess because you had the meeting with Realliance, you were able to get all the local communities' views on the table, and I'm sure that you didn't start out and probably not still fully aligned on every point of view, but you think this process enabled the opposing points of view to be brought together a little closer, bearing in mind that 70% of economic activity in Australia happens in the cities, and it's a growing share in the cities. The regions economically are struggling to keep up. And I've been out to Hay and to Balranald and further on to Mildura, which is doing very well. But it's a struggle. You can't just be relying on the agriculture. I mean, there's a need to revitalise regional areas just as there is to revitalise old areas and cities. Sorry, I've been speaking a lot.
What's really interesting, I mean, I love data, and if you look at the census results that we had, we lost a significant proportion of our population during that millennium drought, and those people were largely employed in agriculture. What happened was agriculture pivoted, and those workers are no longer necessary. A water run's a great example where we all have telemetry now. So as you see that decline across rural New South Wales, it's also indicative of the ability of agriculture to adopt technology and new growing practices and productivity. And what we see now is that our ability to diversify our economy with renewable energy is not just about that sugar hit of the construction phase. It's not even about our ability to draw community benefits into the community to make those really long-term legacy changes. It's our ability now to draw capital to these regions and to further diversify. We've never been able to do that because we are a long way from markets, we're a long way from population. Our location has always been a hindrance for us. Now, all of a sudden, because we're hosting renewable energy, because we're so close to the transmission lines, we become an attractive place to do development where we actually use those electrons here, where we do in-res development, where you have a willing community and willing landholders who want to host renewable energy. What do we do with that now? And that's probably the thing that we find most exciting in council, but also as a community. This is not linear. There isn't just going to be one development. We see it as a real opportunity to further diversify and stop that decline.
And so, broadly speaking, have you done any or commissioned, or I mean, what do you anticipate as the longer term benefits? The construction, from what I read and talk to people about it, people have a mixed view. They see as you say, the sugar hit, but they also see the difficulties, with the road closures and inconvenience and having to find accommodation that won't be used post construction and et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think I mean, I have a view, but I'm interested to hear your view about what you think the longer term benefits for your region will be.
Yeah, David, I think, one of the important things that we did as part of our process was recognise those impacts that you just mentioned. There is no doubting that the construction phase is going to be an impost on my community. We're looking to do some clever partnerships with the developers to address accommodation so we don't get that boom and bust cycle and we don't see our tourism industry destroyed, which is incredibly important to us. But the long-term benefits for us really are that further diversification, and we joked about data centers at the top of the conversation, but it's also about attracting those businesses that are going to be part of. There's 4 developments in our region, 4 large scale developments. I mean, Sameva AGL have just been given planning permission for 247 turbines. So we see there's a real opportunity to support that construction phase, but then to embed those businesses within our community and to service outside of just the renewable development as well. We also see a benefit during operational phase for a town like Hay. 35 highly skilled jobs is absolutely life-changing. To have that many people, families move into this community who are highly skilled and highly educated will change the fabric of our social society here. So it's a massive win for us to be able to have that, to draw that population back.
That's right. And I think it makes it easier for other professionals to move into a community as well. This is just my own feeling. When we're talking regionally, like in Armidale, it can actually be very hard for someone to find a doctor. And Armidale's got a university associated with it. I mean, what is the state, just generally, while we're a little bit off the topic here, but how do you find the general level of infrastructure in your area? I mean, where would the nearest airport be, for instance, that commercial flights fly to?
Nearest airport is Griffith Airport, which is 170 kilometres, hour and a half drive. Nearest hospital, Griffith or Deniliquin. Our we are not a service centre, and our services reflect everything that's been happening in rural New South Wales for the past sort of 50 years, with the closure of support services, with decentralisation of healthcare into larger areas. It's one of the issues that we see as a really real advantage for us in this transition, is that all of a sudden the Griffiths and the Woggers won't maybe be getting all of the sort of money and interest that they always seem to get, which makes me sound a bit like a green-eyed monster. But I mean, that's where the economics go. They go to the more populous centres. So it's really nice for us to have the opportunity for once to say, actually, we're here, we will be hosting, and we want to see the benefits right here in our community, not shifting to those regional cities.
That's right. And then I guess this is fairly strong. I know a lot of councils kind of talk to each other. I was only speaking to someone from Newcastle, quite a contrast to Hay Shire, about what they were planning. But is there much communication between councils about how to approach this from a council perspective? Other people I've spoken to suggest that some councils feel they've been completely left out of the process altogether, perhaps because they didn't get control of it early enough.
There is an advantage in being pushy. That is true. As a region down here, we work really closely with the other 7 LGAs or councils in the Southwest Res. I mean, really closely. I'd have to say that the councils from Arana and New England have been incredibly generous with the work that they have done in supporting us, because they're obviously a bit further down the timeline. The work that Murray Woods has done up at Dubbo has been absolutely the benchmark in terms of planning agreements and community benefits. And we're all really now starting to work together, sort of 3 years down the track. The local government, whether we like it or not, we're the lead agency in these communities, and we are the connectors of those other level of government and developers and community. And while perhaps under-resourced to do it, without the support of my colleagues across not just New South Wales, but across WA, Victoria and Queensland, everyone is really, with best intention, sharing everything that we can to make sure that our communities get the best out of this.
And whilst we're on all this liaison stuff and just talking a little bit of detail of process that we don't do very often on this podcast, what about the interface with the state and the federal governments? How does that work from your perspective?
Gosh, is that where you say no comment and pass the water, please? It is enormously frustrating at our level when we are the ones who are at the coalface to and it's not just this issue. It's many it's all issues where we tend to feel left out of the conversation, where you have decisions made at a federal and state level that are and we cannot help but feel they are imposed upon us. But lemonade from lemons, this is the opportunity that we've been presented, and we will make the best of it for our community. And that is local government 101, that we are here to serve the community, and so we do need to do that. It would be ideal if there was conversations that involved local government and community at that higher level, but we're also very pragmatic. We understand that can't always be the case. We did feel that for a long time we were the poor cousins to the other reses, even though in reality we will have the first transmission line and we will be the first ones to have lights on.
Is that right? I hadn't, I get that the Project Energy Connect from South Australia will be up and running, but before, say, the connection into the Arana zone, but I guess, and you expect projects will therefore get the go-ahead in the southwest earlier than those in Arana, do you?
Yeah, so if we look at the construction timeframes that we've been given from the developers, acknowledging that they are ambitious, and the timelines for PEC, it is our understanding that our projects will probably be connected before any of the others at this point in time. But there are so many variables that need to. I mean, the transport alone is a conversation that is just an enormous conversation that needs to be happening, and that's probably a really good example of where we really need the state and the federal government to be talking to local government when it comes to those transport conversations.
I mean, having said that, and again, having driven out to Mildura and Wentworth and then down to Adelaide and in my electric car and had a look at everything, and I think I've even charged the car in Hay. I mean, there's enormous road trains already on that one big road, aren't there? I mean, it can't be that unusual to have a turbine blade trundling along.
It's not that it's unusual, it's that we do not want that to be at the expense of our existing industry. And we are very firmly, and we have said that in the document we produced, the principles, this must happen with primary production, not at the expense of primary production. Everything that comes into this area and everything that goes out of this area comes by a road. And it's really important to us that that industry is supported and protected while these OSOM movements happen, while we have the construction movements happening as well. We've also got a local industry that we need to protect and ensure that they can still function at their maximum capacity and not at the expense of this construction. So we're getting into an interesting phase in our journey where we're introducing some new people into the marriage, and we just hope it all works.
And I mean, a year or two ago we had an interview with Professor John Cole, who has an academic interest and I suppose professional interest in regional development. And he said, as if I recall it correctly, that you don't necessarily want all your local electricians, to the extent that there are a lot in Hay, tied up on doing work on wind farms, because then that'll hurt the local community as well. In some ways, you actually want the new fly in, fly out, or drive in, drive out jobs. And where are they all going to stay with 800 people?
It's a really good point. And in fact, all of the many of the tradies that we have here in Hay have said when they're not prepared to give up their bread and butter for that 4-year time frame. They will certainly take advantages of opportunities when they come across, but it's not their focus. For some of the bigger operators, this will be an absolute once in a lifetime for them, and they will grab it with both hands and run with it, which is really exciting for us. In terms of where everyone's going to stay, given the sort of isolated locations of both Sameva and Beva, who have footprints in the Hay LGA, They will be looking at workers' accommodation camps. We've hosted a camp in the LGA for the past 18 months, the workers' camp run by Elecnor for Project Energy Connect. And overall, it's been a good experience in terms of having those workers at that camp 45 minutes from Hay. They've been great for our economy. They've been great for our community events. So it's worked very well. We're happy to have that as a similar experience when the construction phase happens for the other two wind farms.
That's right. And we didn't quite finish the conversation on the benefits. We kind of talked about the culture and the people side of things. But I think if I looked at it, you're hoping to have like region-wide electricity price discounts or something like that. But I don't believe any of that's been actually finalised, has it?
When we went to the community and said, well, what do you want to see from this opportunity? Besides the impacts that they identified, everyone unanimously said, we want free electricity. We're hosting them. We can see them spinning. We should feel the benefit in our pocket. Free energy tends to lead to behaviours that are probably not ones that we want to encourage. Air conditioners going 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, but affordable energy, definitely. We want to be able to see our industry and our community have a benefit from that. So we have negotiated that with Someva AGL, and that is something that we will be able to deliver for the LGA. For every resident in the LGA, they will be able to sign up to a voucher system with AGL, and they will get discounted electricity, and so we should.
And I guess the quite a lot of electricity use in like the irrigation side. I can't remember how much around Hay is actually irrigated, but there'd be quite a reasonable level of commercial electricity consumption in the region, would there?
Yeah, well, we're actually one of the biggest cotton growing areas in New South Wales, and we have a gin in Hay, and that is obviously a large consumer of electricity. Even if you look at our engineering firms, they're large consumers of electricity, our hotel and accommodation providers. We want to be able to see that benefit flow through the economy right from the minute they get their electricity bills.
Right. Well, I'll hand back to Giles. I mean, it fascinates me talking about regional economies, and I think, I was shocked to see when I went out to Mildura that it's the world's third biggest almond growing area. It's amazing how much, the sort of, to me, the can-do attitude of people in the Riverina is actually helping them to progress. But I guess that's what I'll hand it back to Giles.
Thanks, David. Look, we have a lot of developers and people in the industry listening to this podcast, and you've obviously got very good outcomes already in Hay. What would your advice be to some of these developers of what not to do or how not to approach it? What are some of them, or turn it into a positive, or what they need to do, perhaps?
I think there's a tendency when developers come out to these areas to deliver an engagement plan or a community consultation plan that's the same as they've delivered in other states on other projects, and that doesn't work because I'm not sure I'm allowed to swear on the podcast, but
We'll give it a go, and we can always edit it out.
people in Hay and in small rural communities, in my experience, have really good bullshit meters, and if they can detect it in the first sort of conversations, it's really hard to turn that around. The other thing is that we're large-scale commodity farmers in this area. We're very successful in terms of our agricultural production, and in fact, leaders in some areas. Treat people with the respect to which they are due. Our community deserves the respect to be treated like the adults that we are, to be able to comprehend complex ideas and complex projects. We're okay. We can do that. So treat us with the respect that we deserve is what I would say. And where I have seen it done well, where developers have respected the community and listened instead of lectured, there is a relationship that builds. And that's something that we really wanted to see with our community. This is a long-term relationship that we've entered into with the developers. It's 30 years. We want to make sure that it's a good relationship. And I think that is really where that start as you mean to proceed comes into play. So the better the relationship that you have with local government in particular, with the community most importantly, the better the outcomes will be for everyone as well. And I think we saw that in the planning process in Hay, where there was, very few objections to these projects because there was a level of respect right from the get-go.
Yeah, it ended going to the Pottinger Renewable Energy Hub, which you've mentioned, from some of it, and AGL did end up going to the Independent Planning Commission because I think there was about 83 objections in the end, but most of them came from more than 50 kilometres away and about a third of them came from interstate. Does that get a bit frustrating? And how do you handle that?
It is, everyone has a right to share their opinion, and that's something we absolutely respect. There are people who, to be honest with you, there are people in our community who do not want this to happen, and they have every right to hold that opinion and to express that opinion through the formal channels, which they have done. It's interesting for us in the community and at council that the objections to the Pottinger wind farm, which, as I said, is 247 turbines. The local objections, so from people who are in our local area, there were less of those than there were to an unmanned service station proposed in the main street. So if that doesn't prove something, I'm not sure what it does. But I mean, it is there are channels there, and it is enormously comforting that there are planning processes, there are complaints channels where people can actually engage in that in a democratic way and voice their opinions. And all we really wanted was to have discussion and not division, and people should be able to express their views.
And that's interesting what you mentioned about that, 247 turbine project. I mean, they probably, well, they haven't not yet got a clear sight of actually being able to build that many because of the grid connection issues and the capacity in that southwest res. But what you're dealing with down there is something that sort of few other communities have been dealing with, in the sense that these are sort of gigawatt scale projects. Many of them are gigawatt scale projects. Does that change the dynamics of it at all?
I mean, we have no experience of large scale infrastructure projects, let alone large scale energy projects. I have had the opportunity to visit the site and look at the siting of the turbines. I think one of the things that we found is that people thought there would be wind turbines across the whole of the southwest renewable energy zone. That you just look out your window and there'd be turbines across the whole of the Hay Plains. The fact that the capacity is limited, that it's only been gone to 4 developers. Sameva, their turbines are spread throughout the 2 properties that are hosting rather than being in a grid. I think we've all seen those wind turbines that are in Texas, where it's a very sort of confronting an industrial view. It will be an industrial view, but because of the environmental impacts, changes as requested by neighbours and landholders, consideration of waterways, the turbines are spread throughout the property rather than being a real visual impost.
I'm just interested in New England. It turns out that a lot of the places where the turbines are going to be built are not necessarily owned by local farmers. A lot of the land up there tends to be owned by interstate people or even overseas people who just, see New England property as something they'd like to own. And I don't know, maybe there's, how is in around the Hay area how is the ownership of the actual properties where these things are going to be hosted? I mean, do you expect, let's be honest, there's 250 turbines. Even if you used 40,000, I think it's more than that, a turbine a year. That's a lot of money. Is that going to go to locally or more to some absent landlord?
Well, I think it goes back to why our topography suits down here and why our primary production suits as well. Sameva, that with the proposal for 247 turbines, that's 2 family properties that we're talking about, because that's the scale of, we're considered to be quite marginal country down here. We don't have the sort of rainfall that Armidale has, obviously. so we do have to have really large holdings to be able to make our production worthwhile and to make it economically viable. So when you're talking about those two landholders, absolutely. I mean, there will be payments that they will receive, but knowing those two families, that funding will be seen in the community.
It actually reminds me of a Chris Hammer book novel I read, which I don't want to get too far off topic, but he said a number of novels in that area, and there was going to be a grand water scheme, and someone was going to make a lot of money. But that'll get me way off topic. Sorry, Giles, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Alison, I've just got one more question, I think. More may come to me as I sort of try to regain my composure. But you mentioned data centers, and this has been something that's been sort of thought of by some of the people that would like to build large wind or solar projects in your region, and sort of frustrated by the lack of grid capacity. Have you guys had any sort of discussions at all with any sort of potential data center providers, or is that something for other people to work on?
No, we never let an opportunity go by. So yeah, we have had some discussions, some really early discussions. I mean, data centers are just one of the opportunities that we see for in-res development. I think, for an area like ours, which is, primary production, agrarian economy, the conversation around hydrogen and the production of ammonia is one that we would be really interested in having. That requires a lot of energy, but we also have a huge market for ammonia here. We're right next door to Shire, who are I think they're the largest producer of crops in New South Wales. Everyone from the northwest will pile in on that one. So we see there's a lot of opportunity there. I mean, also particularly around value add agriculture and processing. Almond processing, as David mentioned, we're not too far from Mildura, which is and Griffith, who are now the largest producers of almonds in Australia, I think. So, sustainable aviation fuel, which we can use from the biomass that we have in the area. There's a lot of opportunity there with INRES. Ironically, the most limiting factor for us at the moment is the transmission lines, because the interest that we had for Southwest was something like 39 gigawatts, with only 3.9 gigawatts available. And it would be a shame to see that interest not be developed in this area.
You don't start us on the transmission lines. This will go over time if we do that.
Don't start me or we will hear swearing.
Very frustrating. Just to clarify one thing then, I mean, you are a farming region. You're really interested in renewables and storage and some of the added value industries. It could be data centers. It could be, ammonia, as you just discussed. Does this threaten in any way the existing farming industry?
It doesn't threaten it. I think it supports it where it fits, and I think that's where we've seen in the other areas. As I've said before, for our community, in our region, in our topography, with our population, it does seem to fit. For those other areas, perhaps not. And that's where we've had this very place-based response. For hay, it does work, and there is an opportunity for primary production to be able to diversify their income streams. And in doing that, what that enables them to do is make much better decisions around their production and their production cycles. It means you don't have to run your country as hard. It means you don't have to make decisions that perhaps would be more of a gamble than you would. It really does support primary industry to grow, because we all know that drought's coming. It's around the corner. The last drought that we had in 2016-17 was the fastest and in terms of impact, the fastest we had ever experienced. It was a wake-up call, I think, for everyone. We'd had a long, slow 10 years with the Millennium Drought, and then we had a very quick fall into the same sort of conditions over the period of 18 months.
And we all know it is actually warmer. So when it doesn't rain, the moisture evaporation happens a lot faster, and the country deteriorates very quickly. But anyway, I'm back off topic again.
No, well, I think it ties it together though, David, because what we've seen here is that our weather patterns have completely changed. Whereas we used to be able to expect an autumn break, we now have our major rainfall in the summer months, which of course means that we're not growing as much because it's 45 degrees. So we're already seeing those impacts. So the conversation about being able to diversify our incomes to be able to still participate in primary production is very real.
Well, Alison, it's been lovely talking to you. I feel that there's more to explore, but I think we sort of filled our time. So, look, thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations on the work that you're doing down there, and good luck with the projects. Good luck with the transmission and getting more capacity, and good luck getting those added value industries into your region.
Thanks. This has been a real thrill. I think I said to you yesterday, Giles, this is like a bucket list. I listen to you guys every morning. I can't believe that I'm speaking to you.
It's no secret the energy and renewable infrastructure sector can do better. That's why at Rayo we're leaving a legacy of accessible, affordable and sustainable energy solutions that benefit everyone. Rayo's highly experienced team work to empower their clients through choice and certainty, delivering world-leading, successful energy infrastructure projects. From project development, engineering, construction, commissioning and maintenance, choose the next generation of infrastructure delivery with Rayo. Let's shape a better tomorrow together. Visit rayo.au.
And that was Alison McLean from the Shire. David, I thought that was a terrific interview. I thought Alison was absolutely great. What did you take from it?
Well, it's not so much that Alison said anything that we didn't already know, in a sense, although it was interesting to me on the timing that the Southwest projects may well end up being ahead of the projects in the Arana zone. Never mind New England.
Yes, New England.
But the general feel just confirmed as someone that comes from the country. I mean, you live at Byron Bay, but it's not quite the same as living in inland Australia, where, you know, access to facilities is tough. You know, when you've got to go to 160 kilometres to an airfield or a hospital, the internet's chancy. You might not get an appointment with a doctor at all. And I keep wanting to emphasise the benefits that flow into the regional economies. Costs, yes, but benefits far outweighing the costs in the longer term. And it was great to find someone that shares that view.
No, absolutely right. And it was interesting that about the same time as we did that interview with Alison McLean, ASL, which is AEMO Services, which is the Consumer Trustee in New South Wales, rolled out its latest infrastructure plan and generation plan and assessment plan. And in amongst that was a decision to ramp up the amount of wind and solar that they intend to have built by the end of this decade, and then further into the 2030s. Also, the storage. The wind and solar has been increased by about 30%, 33%. The storage has been increased by about half, actually. That's the 2034 target for long-duration storage. We need some transmission there, David.
Well, it's great having the planning, but anything you want to build by 2030, really you will have to be starting it next year. You know, and the key statistic so far this year, as you mentioned last week, is that not one new wind project has got the financial close in the latest 6 months. You know, and that's despite the fact that the transmission is increasingly certain, at least parts of it in New South Wales. There's no doubt that HumeLink's going ahead. I haven't had any doubt about that for 18 months or 2 years. You know, Project Energy Connect is now well underway. I won't dwell again on the fact that you can build 3 transmission lines into the Southwest Renewable Zone. You still can't get any electricity out of the bloody place. I mean, you know, whoever did the original planning, anyway, I won't know. If I start, I'll never stop. But the fact is we need some commitment, and that's why it was so incredibly disappointing to see the results from AGL and Origin this week, where the commitment, you know, the discussion of wind and solar development was next to nothing. And it's where I think myself that the Nelson review completely misdiagnosed the problem, in all honesty. They may have, you know, swapping one government subsidy scheme, the capacity investment scheme, for another one, these long-dated contracts, that's great. But the diagnosis of why we're not getting any commitments to wind and solar, I think, was just fatally flawed. AGL's indicating that it wants to keep Bayswater Power Station going as long as possible. Origin really very indecisive or non-committal on the closure of Eraring as between the 27 and 29 dates. Neither of them want to talk about wind and solar projects at all. I mean, it's, I find it dispiriting, and that's what I will say, just dispiriting.
No, look, I'd agree with you, actually. I mean, these are the two biggest energy retailers in the country, and you'd rather hope that they were kind of leading the transition, but they're not. I mean, it's funny about Origin. I actually sort of wrote a headline saying they weren't committed to that 2027 closure, and they got really shitty with me and rang me up and said, you've got to change that because, of course, we are. But they spent most of the morning talking with analysts, talking about their options if they weren't. So they've got this official line with their email saying, yes, it closes by August 2027, but we know that they've got an option with New South Wales to keep it open until April 29. They will make a decision early next year about whether they keep about spending money if they're going to keep an extra unit or 2 units or even more units going beyond 2027. The irony is that they will probably feel obliged or something to keep that thing going longer if no new wind and solar is built, and they have no intention of building any new wind and solar. It wasn't even mentioned.
Well, AGL would rather talk about Netflix subscriptions than actually wind and solar. That's really going to be something that investors can really put their money down on and invest for the longer term. AGL selling a few more Netflix subscriptions. They'll probably give away an iView sub at the same time.
Very important to the new business model, David. How to sort of get into the consumer.
Giles, they're all at the same time. They're busy building batteries left, right, and centre. And if you look at the financial model of this, it's really the fact that if they keep the wind and the solar down, the returns to batteries will go up, because they'll restrict the coal generation. They won't necessarily restrict. The coal generation will run down a bit. There won't be enough new wind and solar, so there'll be plenty of times when spot prices are very high and the batteries can clean up. That's the kind of business model. So in my opinion, they're basically doing everything they bloody well can, I'm swearing again, to throttle down the wind and solar and stop it being built. I think I'm glad we've got a government scheme going on about it, but the capacity investment scheme still requires PPAs to be signed up, beyond the debt coverage, beyond the floor price, and we're still that's where I think the roadblock is. I mean, Tilt's got Liverpool range there. Over a gigawatt of wind, and I think if it could sign a PPA up, but at a respectable price, we'd be getting the go-ahead on that, or a lot closer to it. But that's just one of a number of large projects that are just not progressing at the moment.
Yeah, and that was the theme from the Clean Energy Summit. Basically, people were saying there was no one in the market even vaguely interested in PPAs, apart from maybe Rio Tinto, which of course is trying to sort of repower its smelters in Queensland, which is largely done. It's got a bit of a way to go, and thinking about sort of Tomago in New South Wales. So, yeah, it is a bit dispiriting. I'm not too sure what can be done about it. I mean, those companies would argue it's all about sort of fiduciary duty and things like that, but
what can be done about it, Giles, is the federal government's going to be forced into it. The federal government's forced to loan money out to get the transmission going, and now it's going to be forced to be taking the risk on the wind and solar, because the private sector has just put its foot down and said, we're not going to help. We're not here for you. We don't give a rat's about the future generations. We only care about profit in the next year or two. And when we talk about Origin's results, I mean, that's a bit harsh, but that's the way it looks. It's been going on like that for years and years now, that not AGL nor Origin nor Energy Australia, as far as I know, have signed a wind or solar PPA in years now. And AGL had the nerve to show that their renewable energy share was 20%. I mean, if I was them, I wouldn't be publishing that number, because when the overall share in the market, counting rooftop, is 40%, I mean, I'd be embarrassed, to say I can only do 20 and I'm the biggest gentailer in the country. I guess I'm being a bit harsh, but I feel strongly about this, that without the big gentailers who control 65% of the total customer load, if they will not come to the party, we're going to have to make the market public. We won't be able to have a private market if the private companies won't pay for the generation.
It was interesting. I was looking through the annual report of Origin Energy, and sort of after having this sort of to and from about the closure timing for Eraring, and sort of pointing out that there was no wind and solar mentioned in their results presentation at all, just something in their climate target report. And I checked into the annual report, and it just sort of said, reputational risks. Well, if we're going to close Eraring in 2027 and we haven't built enough wind and solar by then that's a bad reputational risk for the company. Just going, have you guys read your own annual report? Anyway, it's
And the only other thing to mention, well, there's other things you could mention about that interest financial analysts, but maybe not our audience, about cash flow and debt levels. Operating cash flow for the two majors was fairly soft this time around, but does tend to bounce around a bit. And I noticed that Origin's debts jumped up. AGL was actually paying $8. It's the gentailer. It's paying $8 a gigajoule for its gas. I mean, so I pity the poor bloody customers. Here I go again. That are going to have to pay a margin on top of that. And at the end of the day, Origin's had a tremendous success in terms of customer numbers with Octopus. But at some point, it's going to have to turn all those customer numbers into cash flow and profits. This is not like Amazon in the United States, where you can just seemingly go on forever without making a lot of money. And so that's another thing for investors to be keeping an eye on. Anyhow, we've had a long discussion already.
Oh, no, I've got a couple more points to make, actually. Just sort of observing that in the Origin report, their margin for generation was $40 a megawatt hour during the last year, which seems reasonably generous. And AGL had a couple of really interesting charts.
But Giles, they're giving up some of that margin to capital expenditure, which you don't see. So, like, if you look at AGL, for instance, they're spending $400 to $500 million of maintenance expenditure per year on effectively Bayswater and Loy Yang. So over the next 9 years, they're going to sink $4 billion into stations that are going to close within 10 years. It does seem strange to me. I can understand why they're doing it. They get a return, sort of, but it doesn't seem like the best way to build a future.
That's why you're the financial analyst and I am not. But there's one other thing I would point out is with the batteries. I thought that was interesting about their revenue, the premium they get for discharging their battery. That was made very clear. It's about a 300% premium over the market price for AGL, far beyond what they get for hydro and gas. And just also interesting to note about Tomago, and we kind of touched on it a while ago, but there's sort of the firm numbers there. Tomago, I think, is half the price per megawatt hour, as you've pointed out, of Liddell, which is under construction. What's even more fascinating is that there's 450 or something containers for the 2,000 megawatt hour battery compared to 1,500 containers for the 1,000 megawatt hour battery at Liddell. So the containers are getting bigger. That's a subject to sort of having more megawatt hours in the container and also more energy density.
There's a limit to that, Giles, because it's the weight, right?
So 40 tons they are now.
Yeah. So 6 or 7 or 8 megawatt hours pretty much is the limit that I think you can possibly do there. But we are seeing increasing signs, I think, at least in the car battery market, of solid state cells getting closer to something that's for real instead of just something that we talk about. But anyway.
Along with fusion.
Maybe not along with fusion, Giles.
Okay. Look, David, I don't know whether there's anything else to talk about. Apart from Dan Tehan. Dan Tehan was quite amusing today.
Let's not talk about Dan Tehan. Honestly, I've got enough serious topics to talk about, like how to get more out of the southwest zone, how to prevent Victoria stuffing up offshore wind, how to get the big gentailers to actually invest and buy some PPAs, how to get some actual wind projects started in New South Wales and onshore Victoria and get them going again in Queensland, how to get the transmission built. We don't need to have the irrelevancy of Dan Tehan.
In that case, we won't. And I think that's all from us this week. Thank you very much to Alison McLean from Shire Council. Fascinating insights into the thinking down there and some of the great achievements that they have made. So let's hope those projects get underway soon and that more are released if we can find a solution to unlocking capacity down there in that southwest zone. Thanks to you, David, for joining us in the middle of your road trip. Thanks, of course, to our sponsors, Evergen and Pylon. Thanks to all our listeners out there. And, of course, do check out our other podcasts, the Driven podcast on EVs, the Switched On podcast on behind the meter and community batteries and electrification, and, of course, the Solar Insiders podcast on the solar industry. That's all from us. We'll be back with another episode of the Energy Insiders this time next week. And so, bye for now.
Energy Insiders was brought to you by Evergen, the market-leading renewable energy software business that optimises residential and commercial solar and battery systems. Evergen enables large numbers of systems to operate as a single fleet, so network operators can use them as a virtual power plant, generating significant value for consumers, network operators and the energy system as a whole. Evergen software is powering the energy system of the future. Energy Insiders was also brought to you by Pylon. Pylon provides easy-to-use solar design software for installers and retailers with pay-as-you-go pricing, no monthly cost and no lock-in contracts. Join Australia's top solar companies who trust Pylon to design high-resolution, CEC-ready solar proposals.